Good afternoon and welcome to Crow Unscripted. I'm Amy Lewis Hofland, the Senior Director of the Crow Museum of Asian Art, and I'm really honored to be here in this room with you with my dear friend Bonnie Pitman. Bonnie Pitman is the Distinguished Scholar in Residence at UT Dallas, Director at the DMA, former Director at the DMA, also the Deputy Director when I met you in 2000, and most importantly, and I should have said this first, my very good friend. So thank you, Bonnie, for being here.
Be with you, Amy.
And we are called together today to share space, to reflect on the great and remarkable life of our friend Richard C. Brettell, who we know as Rick. And I'd love to begin this time that we're sharing here in this virtual space with a moment of silence, if that would be all right with you, Bonnie.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I've been thinking about our conversation today and knowing your background and thinking about who would be a balm. I've been thinking about Pema Chodron. And so I've been looking at the places that scare you. And I've been thinking about the courage of our friend Rick. And this comes from chapter 3, The Facts of Life. A fresh attitude starts to happen when we look to see that yesterday was yesterday and now it is gone. Today is today and now it is new. It is like that. Every hour, every minute is changing. If we stop observing change, then we stop seeing everything as new. And this is Sigzar Kontrul Rinpoche, and I would love to ring the bell that I got from the Tibetan monks. We'll just offer a moment of silence for all that are here. And taking just a moment to lower the eyes, exhale the day. Arrive in this moment, honoring our friend Rick. And having joy in the rememberings. And in this moment, having joy in the rememberings, responsibility in the takings, and love in the leavings, with gratitude for his life. So Bonnie, I think of you as one of those people that likes to do hard things. And it's a little bit hard to come live into this world of Facebook and talk about a personal friend. And I want to first thank you for being willing to do this and honor Rick in this way and our friendship in this way. And we're both University of Texas at Dallas, and we're both colleagues now of Rick because of Rick. And so there's a lot to say about the channels of our relationships with him, the channels of being in a professional relationship with him, the channels of more importantly being his friend and being part of his great vision for art and culture with rigor in our city. And so I'd love just to start chronologically because I know that you knew Rick before I did, or maybe actually I might have met him in '98, but I bet you met him before that. So could you share with our room here where you met Rick and what you thought the moment you met him?
Well, first, Amy, thank you for inviting me. I think I've had such a hard time these past days because I miss him so much. Rick sent texts and called me almost every day of our life together at the university. So, and before it, for 20 years that I was here in Dallas, we were in touch. But these last months, we were in constant communication. And so this period of mourning is very difficult, but you've given me a way to articulate with you and with your viewers the great gift that he gave me of love and friendship and mentorship. And what many people may not know is that both of us are mischievous, daring, and not following the rules friends, people. And so that bonded us in so many ways. But going back to your question, I became I knew Rick when he was at the Art Institute and went there as colleagues. I was in Berkeley and in Dallas. I was in Berkeley, and saw some of the great exhibitions, that great Monet exhibition that he did. And I remember standing in front of a painting that actually the Perot's lent of a view of a fence in the winter storm. And he described it in a way that only Rick can do, but it was there that we bonded over our great love of art and love of communicating art. And so from that moment forth, we were just in communication and in admiration of each other. When he came to Dallas I think it was 1986, the Hammond Wing was opened, or the Hammond Wing opened in 1986, and I came down for a visit, and Rick and I enjoyed that immensely together. And I walked through the building with him and saw his whole installation about American art and this rethinking of the collections, and very importantly, the establishment of the Meyer Library. And it was just, and his passion for thinking and learning about art. And that's where, we just sort of really became good personal friends. And over the years, he was at the DMA. I was probably in Seattle and then went on to Berkeley. But it was a wonderful time for us to just sort of stay connected and share our mutual vision. So that's where we started. And lots of adventures happened after I moved to Dallas in 2000. And as you said, we all overlapped in the 90s, but in 2000, we became deeply, he was among the first people I called on. And as the deputy director at the museum and as the director of the museum, he was always on my list of people. Now, what do you think? And he always gave wise counsel.
He did. And I'm not sure even our viewers know that Rick was one of the advising directors to the Crow Museum and was very helpful to Trammell S. and to Margaret Crow in 1997 and 1998 when they were putting together the museum. And Rick worked very closely with Clarence Shangraw from the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. And I really think it was Rick that held the high standard for the selection of the collection. Yes. He was the one that said it has to be on the level of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and we're not going to accept anything less. And so, there were 8,000 objects that they reviewed that summer of 1998, and they just chose 611. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because of Rick, who said, we're not going to let anything slip in that's not of museum quality, which was really important to the future Crow. And I think, he was somewhat of a myth to me for a while. I was a coordinator of education, so I didn't have a lot of interface with Rick. But it was in 2016 in December when he held a meeting of museum directors locally and invited us to meet our now dear friend, Ambassador Lozoya from Mexico, who opened the Puebla International Museum of the Baroque. And we were looking at early diagrams. These two gentlemen, Ambassador Lozoya and Rick Brettell, are the kind of men and human that can create majesty out of nothing, and just have this vision and then it happens. That's one of the things I learned very quickly about Rick. And he invited me to this lunch, and at the end, Dr. Lozoya said, who's interested? And of course I raised my hand, and that opened up the whole future for Talavera and the big project we had at the Crow Museum. So Rick has been my toughest critic in a way, and I'm so grateful for that rigor. And he made me work harder as a museum director and made me stand up for our own sort of intellectual path as a museum. He was very challenging to the Crow, and I appreciate that. But then in the fall of 17, he came back to me and invited us to explore this conversation with UT Dallas. And I think in so many ways, this project of the Athenaeum and the complex of performance and museums and how it will inform and change the lives of students forever at UT Dallas is really his greatest legacy. And I know that we've gotten a lot closer.
Well, just like you, Rick helped me to come to the university after I stepped down from the Dallas Museum of Art due to my health reasons. He just reached out immediately, and along with Hobson Wildenthal, and I'm sure he went to Hobson and said, we need to hire Bonnie. And even though it ended up being two former museum directors from the Dallas Museum of Art working at the university, that was very much his vision. And we co-taught together beginning in 2012 for almost 2 years. We taught students, and that's where I learned how to teach at the university, because I was used to teaching for the public. And secondly, his love of the students and enduring passion to make them become scholars and to bring Dallas into the lives, the city of Dallas, the collectors, the museums, all of those experiences into the lives of the students. And he was just phenomenal that way. And I will always be grateful for him, to him, for this, for embracing my work, and also for bringing me to UTD, which we've had a wonderful tenure of teaching. And of course, the whole experience after that. One of the things that I just want to mention is that Rick loved all art, including contemporary art. People think of him as the scholar in Impressionism, but during his tenure at the DMA and even in his teaching at UTD, he really loved local artists. And together because we had a great network, we went to studios, we went to collectors, we dragged the students everywhere. And so when I started teaching about 2 years later on my own, Rick, all of that is a part of my curriculum, that, we have to get out there and do it. We have to be with the people who create it. We would go to the galleries all the time together. And, he just was voracious in his appetite to connect the visual arts and living artists and new ideas with the students and with him, because you watched how it made him flourish.
Right. He really was great. Voracious is the right word. And I loved how Harold Brettell said he lived 3 lifetimes in one. He's one of those people that didn't waste a minute.
Didn't waste a minute. Yeah, ever. And, really everything about Rick was, I remember when the many lunches that we shared together at his home. This is kind of a personal friend detail, but Rick was an amazing cook, and he would prepare soups and salads and gather a few people, like 2 or 3 people at lunch, and the conversations were so extraordinary. And it was there that we talked about his life at UTD, the vision of creating the O'Donnell Institute, and the 2 years, sort of a year and a half that led up to the great gift of $17 million that kind of literally transformed the university. And then on to acquiring, because he's a very, he loves great ideas and great people, the Wildenstein Library from Paris that's here now and will be part of the Athenaeum. And then his ideas evolved into the Athenaeum. So I never knew when I sat down what the conversation topic was going to be. But I knew it was going to be new ideas and new experiences that we would create. And I had it's kind of a helpful Hannah way of being behind him, sort of making things happen.
Right. And what a joy. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
that way too. When I first went up to UTD and sat in his office, we sat in the war room was what he called it. And we would joke because I would call it the peace room, but it was the room that had all the drawings that Corky Cunningham did of the Athenaeum with the visioning plan, along with Ginger. And we sat and had this beautiful lunch that was French prepared by Pierrette. And we sat across from just the two of us. And I knew it's sort of that moment where I had goosebumps and I just knew that my life was about to change. And he started talking about the impact of what this would mean to North Dallas, and especially being an Asian museum up there. And I just remember, he said, this has to happen, like this, with this sort of penetrating belief, right? He was so committed to what he saw, and he never let go of that. And he was like, and you're going to be part of it. And I just knew in that moment that what he was saying was right. And it was intoxicating. It was ethereal. It was sort of this time when the whole world shifted around me. And I called Trammell on the way home and I said, we've got to do this. This is a moment not to miss. And I'm grateful that Rick had the ability to see, had the ability to see the parts that needed to come together for the greater good.
Very much in the line of what you're saying. His vision was contagious. And he had this extraordinary ability to sort of listen and to hit to other ideas and articulate his ideas that was visionary. And, I have to go back and just remember that, when I started, the O'Donnell was just this brand new organization. And I went to him with the work that I do in art and medicine and wanted to do a conference at the Museum of Modern Art and bring together medical professionals and museum people. And Rick said, well, of course you need to do that. And so we have this big website now, and we have a network of almost 200 physicians and medical schools and museums around the country that do this work. But, it wasn't central to what Rick cared about, but it was central to me. And he loved promoting, great ideas. And he was just so passionate about it and supportive about it over the years that I've been at the university. And that was, even though it wasn't exactly in impressionism or in scholarship, he had a great capacity to see well beyond that in the arts and the impact that the O'Donnell Institute could have. And these projects like the one with the Museum Capodimonte in Naples and Nanjing Province in the university in Nanjing, here are multiple examples of immensely creative programs that came out, and he had the ability to let go of that and let the idea flourish with the people like you and like me and others that are doing Capodimonte and Nanjing. He trusted that it would be done well. And so he let go and allowed that flourishing to really happen. And so his legacy just grew and grew and grew immeasurably because of all the people that he touched.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think about, we were talking about this before we went live. Mm-hmm. Rick is a compassion figure. Mm-hmm. That idea of fierce compassion is one that is rigorous and tough and rich in content. He was always teaching us wherever we were about, about beauty. I think of Rick as a teacher of beauty, which is also a perspective of being a Bodhisattva. But just this idea that there was so much giving. And the thing that astounds me is thinking about the last chapter of his life and what a fierce warrior he was around his illness.
Right.
And teaching me for future illnesses that I will have, what it looks like to show up to that with a fearless heart, to be with what is and be okay with what is. Rick was very honest about it, and he was almost transparent in his managing of it. And these are hard things. These are things that human beings don't want to talk about. Rarely do we get the window from someone like that.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly something that we shared deeply as personal friends because of my my medical complications. And I think for both of us, we had the capacity to understand deeply what the other person was going through. You know, most people would anticipate, or he might mention that it was a tough day and he was in pain. But with me, he would describe that pain. And with Rick, I would, you know, many of my returns from the hospital, and many times when I was in the hospital with my respiratory problems, he would show up with flowers and, you know, this enormous smile on his face and just say, you know, I want to do something new with you today. So I decided, you know, today it would be red. And I wrote about this on my Facebook about the morning he showed up, and, you know, when I wasn't doing well, and he knew it, and he came with cherries and zinnias, and we shared tea and these intimate moments. Or, you know, later when over and over and over again, you'd be so surprised how many times I had to recover from the hospital, and Rick would call me up and he'd say, okay, we're going to start walking again. And he would go pick me up, and or I would get to his home, and we would walk down the Greenway Park which surrounded him. And he knew how far I could walk, but he knew I needed to walk, and he was just there holding my hand and taking me to the point that I could manage. And that understanding, that reaching out in his busy schedule and in all that he was thinking about and doing to a person like me was just the greatest gift I can have. And I think of the joy in his face and the color of his eyes and just sort of looking out at me. And he always had a smile and always had an open heart, as you and I would say, to be there with us in physical presence and spiritually. And that was something that I just want to remind people of, that this was a major part of who Rick was this deeply compassionate and loving human being that shared it so generously.
Right. And so devoted to a better city, you know,
Yes.
a better citizen,
Oh my gosh.
a better student, a better president, you know, if we think about all the things we've been talking about lately, in terms of really holding UT Dallas to this high standard, and helping our leadership at UTD embrace this new strategic vision. I think the strategic vision comes from Rick to engage the arts.
Right.
So what part of Rick's legacy will you carry forward as a leader at UTD?
Wow, I hadn't thought about that, but I'm hoping to carry forward in my teachings with the Honors College. And now I also teach with this, the Center for Brain Health with Sandy Chapman. A deep, you know, my focus in my work is about how art can heal, and also the important issues around the perception and engagement with art with passion. I call it the power of observation. And Rick was fascinated with this work that brings neuroscience and art together with a new understanding about looking and observing, about being fully present in the work. And so I'm hoping, and my teaching with the students, and I'm hoping that those things I can carry on in some way in his honor, because it's really an immensely important part of the future.
It really is. And he knew that would make the difference, right? As you grow this new class of cultural citizens who are international. And that's one of the things I loved about Rick was his love of Asia. That's something else I don't think people know. And sitting in his house, surrounded by the joy and whim of their collecting and some of the Japanese ceramics that Rick has acquired over the years. So
and also African art, you know, I mean, you sit in the living room and there's African art, and of course, more books than you and I would ever be able to read in a lifetime. I think that the other thing that Rick and I really have fostered is a relationship between the University of Texas at Dallas and the Dallas Museum of Art in their conservation work and in the teaching of the students using the collections. The partnership between the DMA and the university is something that I'm going to work with Michael Thomas to try to really nurture and continue. And that, of course, relates to the Crow too, because the DMA also has a very good Asian collection. So there are lots of opportunities with the new Athenaeum, to grow and embrace a bigger city, bigger than any one institution can make. And that was definitely a vision of Rick's.
Definitely. I think we've got a question. Let me just read it here. So this is from Rex Kuntz, and it's, thank you so much for focusing on Rick's compassion. Was his gift of communication. He taught me to speak publicly, based at least partly in his deep compassion and understanding of his audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a nice question.
Yeah.
I do think he was very empathetic, like you're saying, Bonnie. I mean, he knew how to talk to collectors in a way enrolling. He knew how to talk to 18-year-old students from India in a way that was captivating. I think he knew he knew his audience well before.
But he also, to be successful at that, to be a successful teacher and educator, and also to be a man of such humane qualities and compassion, he was a great listener. And while his head was bursting with ideas, he had the capacity to slow down when you were in his presence and really listen to what you were saying. And you may agree or disagree with Rick, and there certainly are many examples of that. The reality is that he could not do all that he did with teams of people and fundraising and all these different and diverse activities if he wasn't capable of listening deeply.
That's true. It is true. And I think it's part of what allowed him to sort of navigate so quickly through 3 lifetimes in one life.
Right.
Was an ability to tune in. That's one of the hardest things to do, is to learn to listen.
Yes.
We have a comment from the lovely and wonderful Roger Molina. Some contagions are desirable. Rick spread ideas like beneficial viruses. The network, I love it. The network he created between DFW art historians, excellent independent of institutional affiliation. We need to create new communities of practice that cross disciplines and institutions. I mean, I think what we will see and what this community will see in the next 5 years is the flowering of what Rick was headed toward with the Athenaeum and with this complex, this arts complex, as the first major museum north of 635.
Right.
And I think it's only just beginning. It's sort of this beautiful adage that Rick planted seeds for trees he wouldn't know the shade of, that idea. So, and then I think we have another, Jacqueline McDonald. I'm so touched to hear about his love for teaching and his goal of making future scholars. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing about Dr. B. He has inspired so many, and his visions are contagious. It's true. And that's really the gift of being human, I think, is being able to work in a place where these kinds of relationships were created. And I think it's so much meaning. It has so much meaning for me in this life. To show up to you, Bonnie, and know that we have a deep background of relatedness, and that we had it with Rick, and it will make our work stronger and the outcomes of our work greater.
Right.
So, Caroline and Amelia, thank you for being in the production booth. This program, Crow Unscripted, is intended to be as if you all walked into the office at UTD, and don't we wish we could? But soon enough, we will. And Bonnie, thank you for opening up your home office to us today. Thank you for honoring Rick in this.
Well, I want to thank you, Amy, again, because many memories were brought back, and I thank the listeners for commenting on that. And there are people who make a significant difference in the world, and Rick was one of those, but he also was a devoted husband, a loving friend, and supporter of the arts. And there's going to be a great capacity for the university to come together and for us to share his vision for the future. And I know you feel committed to it. I certainly do. And I know EODIA with Michael Thomas and the whole staff feel the same way. So I thank you for this opportunity to recognize him.
Thank you. And I'd love for this to be an invitation for you to come back. I'd love to talk to you about your work and what you're thinking about with your many projects like Do Something New. If you're listening and you're not following Do Something New and Bonnie Pitman on Instagram and Facebook, I hope you will. So Bonnie, thank you for the light you bring the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you to everybody.